New Jersey, 3:47 a.m., 1999. The phone rings in Whitney Houston's house. On the other end of the line, a voice she would recognize anywhere. But this time there was something different, something broken. "Mom? Are you awake?" It was Whitney. But it wasn't the Whitney the world knew. It wasn't the voice that had conquered millions. It was the voice of a desperate daughter, making a call that would reveal a pain hidden behind perfect smiles and flawless performances. What Whitney said that early morning shocked Sissy in a way that not even years of worry had prepared her for. Because sometimes, the brightest people are fighting battles that no one can see. If you're ready to discover what happens when perfection meets desperation, and how a mother's love can illuminate even the deepest darkness, hit that like button and ring the bell. Because this story will change how you see fame, pressure, and the price of success. Whitney Houston in 1999 wasn't just a singer. She was a global phenomenon. The voice, the face, the success. Everything about her seemed perfect in the public's eyes. But behind the lights and applause, Whitney was living a completely different reality. Her marriage to Bobby Brown was publicly disintegrating. The media pursued her relentlessly. Rumors about her behavior were multiplying. And the pressure to maintain the image of America's voice was suffocating the real woman behind the persona. Whitney had built her career being impeccable, never making mistakes, never disappointing, always being the best version of herself. But this impossible standard had a cost that no one saw. She was always the perfect daughter, the perfect singer, the perfect image. Whitney Houston recalled years later. But perfection is a prison, and Whitney had been locked in it for years. That night in 1999, something inside Whitney finally broke. And when you spend years hiding your pain, when it finally surfaces, it comes with devastating force. The weeks before that call had been particularly brutal for Whitney. A performance that didn't go as planned. Cruel headlines. Photographers following her to her house. Arguments with Bobby. The constant feeling of falling apart while everyone expected her to remain perfect. Whitney had spent the day trying to seem fine, smiling for the cameras, saying everything was okay, that she was happy, that the marriage was solid, all the necessary lies to protect the image. But at night, alone in her room, the masks fall. And it was in that moment of absolute solitude that Whitney realized something terrifying. She no longer knew who she was. "I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person looking back," Whitney later described that moment. "I saw Whitney Houston. The brand, the image, the expectation. But the girl who used to sing in church, she had disappeared." Panic came like a wave. Breathing became difficult. The walls seemed to be closing in. Whitney grabbed the phone, her hands trembling, and dialed the only number she'd known by heart since childhood. The phone rang once, twice, and then that familiar voice answered. "Hello." "Mom!" Whitney tried to maintain her composure, but her voice was already breaking. "Mom, I don't know who I am anymore." Whitney Houston, who had been a gospel singer for decades and raised Whitney in the world of music, immediately recognized the tone in her daughter's voice. It wasn't just sadness, it was desperation. "Baby, tell me, I'm here." And then the floodgates opened. Whitney began talking about the constant pressure, about how every move she made was judged, about how she felt she had lost control of her own life, about how everyone expected her to be perfect, but she was falling apart inside. "I can't do it anymore, Mom. I try to be what everyone needs me to be, but I'm drowning in it. I wake up and put on a mask. I sleep and it's still there. I don't know anymore where the performance ends and where I begin." Sissy listened in silence, her heart breaking with every word. She had always known that fame had a price, but hearing her daughter so broken was more painful than anything she could imagine. "Whitney," Sissy said softly, "do you remember when you were 7 years old and sang in church for the first time?" Whitney sobbed on the other end of the line. "I remember." "Why did you sing that day?" Because I loved singing. Because it made me feel close to God. Because it was pure. Exactly, baby. It was pure. It had nothing to do with being perfect or impressing anyone. It was about expressing what was in your heart. When did that change? Whitney remained silent for a long moment, processing the question. I think when I realized people were expecting things from me, that I had to meet expectations, that disappointing wasn't an option. And who said disappointing wasn't an option? Sissy asked gently. Everyone, the label, the fans, the media, you. Sissy felt the accusation like a stab, but knew there was truth in it. Whitney, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen with an open heart. You're right. I put pressure on you. I wanted you to be great. I wanted you to have all the opportunities I never had. But I never wanted it to cost your peace. I never wanted it to cost who you really are. Whitney's tears were now of relief mixed with pain. Mom, I'm so tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not. I'm tired of being strong when I feel weak. I need to stop. I need help. Then let's stop, baby. Let us stop right now. Sissy did something that night that surprised even herself. She didn't offer quick solutions. She didn't try to fix everything immediately. She simply stayed on the line for 4 hours, listening to her daughter pour out years of accumulated pain. You know what I realized that night? Sissy shared years later. That my daughter didn't need more advice on how to be better. She needed permission to be imperfect. She needed to know that I would love her even if she failed. When the sun began to rise in New Jersey, something had changed in that conversation. Whitney, Sissy said firmly, I want you to do something for me. When you wake up today, I want you to look in the mirror and say, I don't need to be perfect, I need to be true. What if I don't know how to be true anymore? Then you'll learn again, and I'll be here every step of the way. Not as your manager, not as someone who needs you to be a star, but as your mother, who loves the girl you are, not the image you became. Whitney took a deep breath, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Thank you, Mom, for listening, for not judging, for just being here. Always, baby. Always. That call didn't solve all of Whitney's problems overnight. Her journey would still have many difficult turns, but it marked an important turning point. It was the first time in years that Whitney admitted her vulnerability. In the following weeks, Whitney started therapy. She began setting boundaries with the media. She started slowly, rebuilding her identity beyond the public persona. Sissy changed her approach too. She stopped pushing Whitney to be the Whitney Houston the world expected and began supporting the Whitney her daughter needed to be in that moment. That call taught me something fundamental. Sissy reflected. Sometimes loving someone means letting them fall apart. It means not trying to fix them, but simply holding the pieces while they rebuild themselves. The relationship between mother and daughter, which had become complicated by the pressure of success, began to heal. They started having more honest conversations. Conversations where Whitney could admit her struggles without fear of disappointing. Other artists who learned of the story began opening up about their own struggles. The industry began slowly to recognize the mental and emotional cost that fame takes. Whitney showed us that even the strongest voices can break under pressure, said a psychologist specializing in celebrity mental health. And more importantly, she showed that asking for help isn't a weakness. It's courage. Although Whitney would still face many personal battles in the years that followed, that conversation with her mother remained as a moment of clarity amid chaos. A reminder that behind every star is a real person, with real fears and insecurities. This story reminds us of something powerful. The strongest person you know may be fighting an invisible battle. Whitney Houston had everything the world values: fame, talent, success. But she was losing the only thing that truly mattered: herself. And when she finally had the courage to ask for help, it wasn't to an expensive therapist or a famous guru. It was to her mother. Because sometimes the deepest healing comes from the simplest connection. Think about it. How many times have you pretended to be okay when you weren't? How many masks do you wear every day to meet others' expectations? When was the last time you were completely honest about your struggles with someone you love? Whitney's lesson isn't about the danger of fame. It's about the danger of losing yourself trying to be what others expect. And Sissy's lesson? Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone you love isn't advice, isn't a solution. It's simply being present. It's listening without judging. It's loving without conditions. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think differently about pressure, perfection, and vulnerability, hit that like button and share it. Because someone in your life needs to know that it's okay not to be okay. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because we keep bringing stories that remind us that our humanity, with all its imperfections, is what makes us truly extraordinary. Until next time. And remember, you don't need to be perfect. You need to be true.